Washington, AP. In the 12-year run-up to hosting the 2022 Men's World Cup soccer tournament, Qatar has been on a ferocious construction spree with few recent parallels. It built 7 of its 8 World Cup stadiums, a new metro system, highways, high-rises and Lusail, a futuristic city that 10 years ago was mostly dust and sand. For years, Qatar promised something else to distinguish this World Cup from the rest: it would be carbon neutral, or have a negligible overall impact on the climate. And for almost as long, there have been skeptics, with outside experts saying Qatar and FIFA's plan rests on convenient accounting and projects that won't counteract the event's carbon footprint as they advertise. Counting emissions. In an official report estimating the event's emissions, Qatari organizers and FIFA projected that the World Cup will produce some 3.6 million metric tons of carbon dioxide from activities related to the tournament between 2011 and 2023. That's about 3% of Qatar's total emissions in 2019 of roughly 115 million metric tons, according to World Bank data. Qatar and FIFA say the largest source of emissions will be travel, mostly the miles flown from overseas. That will make up 52% of the total. Construction of the stadiums and training sites and their operations will account for 25%, the report said. Operating hotels and other accommodations for the 5 weeks, including the cruise ships Qatar hired as floating hotels, will contribute 20%. But in its report, Carbon Market Watch said those figures are not the whole story. It said Qatar vastly underestimated the emissions from building the 7 stadiums by dividing the emissions from all that concrete and steel by the lifespan of the facilities in years, instead of just totaling them. Qatar defended its math and said it has worked hard to avoid creating white elephant venues that often sit idle in host countries after a tournament has ended. It says it has developed plans for each stadium after the games are over. No other country has engaged so deeply with its citizens to ensure a sustainable legacy is left behind after a FIFA World Cup, a spokesperson for the Qatari Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy said. Qatari organizers did not respond to a request for comment about whether they will count the flights and pollution totals, instead saying in a statement that any discrepancies would be explained after the World Cup. A spokesperson for the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy called the methodology behind Qatar's carbon neutral pledge best in practice. Carbon offsets questioned. Central to Qatar's plan to reduce World Cup emissions are carbon offsets. Sometimes called carbon credits, these promised to cancel out or absorb the same amount of greenhouse gases emitted by a company or event, so that it's as if the event emitted nothing. So far, Qatari organizers have pledged to buy 1.8 million carbon offsets from the Global Carbon Council, a Doha-based carbon credit registry where renewable projects are verified and listed. 1 carbon credit is equal to 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide avoided or removed from the atmosphere. They're relying on arguably some of the lowest quality credits that exist today, said Danny Cullenward, an energy economist and lawyer who directs policy at Carbon Plan, a California-based nonprofit that evaluates climate programs. He said there are severe problems with additionality with the credits Qatar and FIFA are using, which he evaluated. Cullenward and other experts say carbon credits often promise more than they deliver. The global carbon credits market remains largely unregulated. It's not clear that the strategy of carbon offsetting is actually meaningful, Cullenward said. Qatar's efforts. It's really enhanced the energy basket for Qatar, said Sadghani, an engineering professor at Qatar University who designed the stadium's air conditioning systems. Before we only burn gas to generate power. Organizers have repeatedly said the country's decision to offset the event's carbon emissions should be recognized rather than criticized. Karim Elgindi, a fellow at London's Chatham House think tank who previously worked as a climate consultant for the World Cup, said Qatar's efforts at greening the tournament show a positive trend for a sporting event. It indicates that Qatar, one of the world's top natural gas exporters, is taking steps to improve its climate credentials, Elgindi said. Even if the country is doing that in a way that works with them.